So there was a survey done with CEOs from 126 major corporations, and almost 100% of them believe that a skills gap threatens their business. Now, Russell had made mention of this, even speaking to the CIO of the UN. And not only does it threaten their businesses, it also threatens the economic competitiveness of the country. And we know that there's lots of reasons for this. So let's start off by talking to our panelists and asking Jeanne, the skills gap that exists in the corporate sector, tell us why. Why does it exist?
Yes, well, it starts off basically with this premise that every organization, every company, every organization in the world is on this digital journey. And in fact, if you talk to all these CEOs, what they'll tell you is that they plan on completely reinventing their business or their industry over the next 5 years. And it's a long journey. It's not a short one. It's not a race. But what each one of these industry giants will also tell you is that if they don't do it, they are going to be disrupted by some other company that comes outside of their industry and starts to whittle away at their customer base. So there's this burning platform for change in industry. And it doesn't matter whether it's the financial services industry, healthcare industries. It's amazing to me that even the most highly regulated industries are thinking about who is going to disrupt me from outside. So banking is thinking, well, who's going to disrupt me? Maybe it might be Walmart. Maybe it might be some other fintech company that comes out of nowhere that I have no idea what they're going to bring to the table. So as a result of that, all of these organizations have a very precise plan, or at least trying to get a precise plan together on their digital journey. And they're putting money behind that plan. And they're starting to think about, do I need, chief digital officers? Do I need to have a completely different skill set in my sales and marketing and product teams? And all of that sort of trickles down. That's why you see a lot of change happening, a lot of restructuring happening inside of companies. Companies are trying to prepare themselves for the inevitable, which is digitization will be the way that companies run their business. And so what's happening now is, CEOs will also tell you they understand on this journey that a big issue they have is, one, they have to figure out how to out-innovate their competition and those around them and those that they can't see. The second thing is they know they need new talent, new types of thinking in their organizations. So they are literally starting to import people from technology companies, just out of school. They're trying to bring people in that, have really no background in their space to really think about it differently. And they're also setting out an agenda, in addition to having an innovation agenda and getting people to set up and think about that in each one of their lines. They're also thinking about what do they do with their talent pool. Both medical industries and financial services, I'll mention those because these are two big areas in New York. They are both in this quandary of having lots and lots of people that are later in age that maybe haven't lived their lives in technology. Some of them have a passion for it, some of them don't. Some of them aren't interested. And so they're having to really think about what do they do with this, with this leadership team, with the next level down and the next level down, and then how do they bring in a mass of people that are going to think differently. Now, I will say that they're also thinking about reskilling. What we're encouraging them to think about is that the perfect blend of capability is somebody who understands your culture but is willing to challenge it, somebody who is interested in technology, not necessarily very good at it yet, but very interested in technology and willing to learn from others. And so what we're going to find is that in addition to organizations bringing in a lot of interesting insertions from other industry, they're going to start to think about building their bench again. They're going to have to start rethinking about redeveloping their workforce, because 80% of the job is reskilling what you have, and 20% of the job is, of course, trying to find some strategic investments in talent that you can bring in that sort of chart the course, right? Sometimes you need to put in people from a few different areas to get the rest of the people in the organization thinking differently, and to have them actually participate in a way that they feel comfortable, right? Because they have somebody there that's sort of leading the charge and not afraid to take some of those risks. So I think we're going to move to a world where first, we're going to have to get back to building our talent again. We've had, many years of just thinking it can sort of come on its own, that we can just sort of naturally let it flow. And I think we're going to think about much more aggressive development in the future, redevelopment of the workforce. And you're going to see lots of things popping up, lots of third-party programs, lots of companies there ready to, plant the flag and help your organization through this. You'll certainly see all the major consulting firms out there coming in and having these discussions with your CEOs and your next in line, and then trying to help them think through, some of this strategy. And I would say that, the talent that we're all going to be looking for, yes, is going to have some digital native capability there, but also a talent pool that knows how to learn. Because whatever you know today gets outmoded in a year and a half from now. And in fact, in the Silicon Valley where I live, if I'm not learning every day in my job, if I'm not constantly pushing myself, stretching myself, throwing myself literally under the bus sometimes to get myself to do things that maybe I'm uncomfortable with, that I, don't know today, then I am going to quickly be outmoded. I know that, right? I live in this technology world. It's changing every single day. And what's going to happen is some of this is going to permeate the rest of society, right? Some of this is going to have to permeate. And as a result of that, we all have to start thinking about this pace of change, the ability to learn continuously, and this whole aspect of having the humility, but the courage, right, to make the change and take the calculated risks that you're going to need to do to reinvent yourself along the way. So we're all going to go through, I think, this major reinvention, regardless of where we are. Millennials will be reinventing themselves because they don't know everything either. Believe it or not, they don't know everything about technology. We have a lot of those people working for us, and they don't come in necessarily tapped in, tuned on like you think they are. And a lot of times we have to actually, get them skilled up to learn some of these things. So yeah, I think we're going to be in a aggressive redevelopment phase for a long time, and the companies that do it the best are companies that can rebuild their talent and focus on the right skills and understand what they need and build that strategy and have that talent architecture, if you will be the ones that thrive in this digital age.
Mm-hmm. And Tom, what are your thoughts on why the skills gap exists in the corporate sector?
The nature of the way companies will need to compete, right, as we go forward. The disruptive nature, as you were so eloquently talking about, the disruptive nature of technology, especially the disruptive technologies that are about to arrive that we haven't seen yet, right? The nature of the changing demographic around what someone who will broadly characterize as a millennial today, what their expectations are on how they want to work and how they want to engage. Also, the realization of understanding is that that particular cross-section of the population has actually been involved with technology their entire lives, right? So the nature of the synapses that they deal with, have been modified according to that level of engagement. So it leads to basically trying to solve a complex puzzle that says, one, how do I secure and advance my brand and my ability to compete in a world where life is getting a lot faster, right? Entrants and influencers to the market can arrive much faster. How do I craft a vision and strategy that says I have the workforce that's available to me that's nimble enough to adapt to be able to execute that strategy to arrive at a better brand, higher quality, lower risk, more profitability, and so on. So I think those are the sort of, it's the landscape that's there. Obviously being influenced by climate change, energy, all those things, the aging population, and different expectations. So in my world, we sort of started to dissect that and said, yep, if you can get on a Google Hangout with Google Docs, and you can bring people together to do work in a different forum, where you used to bring them together face-to-face, how do you build trust? How do you build a level of engagement? How do you build the fact that people are going to be willing to in effect, forge a relationship that may be one that for a while is digital, right? Versus the norms of bringing people together. So how do you do it differently and expect people to engage differently? How do you prepare for that workforce that says, they don't work for me. I don't hire them. They're entrepreneurs. They've got their medical, they got their whole life, but they work a cross-section of this industry across the 5 major brands in that industry, and that's their lifestyle, right? But that's a choice, and they're under contract. How do I make them relevant to my company? Companies are wrestling with this today because that market is growing rapidly, and we'll continue to see that change. There's a dynamic as well that is, when you look at basic skills around problem solving, critical thinking, writing, right, that are seriously challenged by the nature of the way the world is changing, right? Some of the norms of what when you recruit, you're bringing people right out of school, you already see these differences and these gaps that you now are doing what I affectionately would say is remediation, right? Because you should have an expectation that's done already, but you have to do it, right? And then you have to do it within a context of what's acceptable within your culture, right, and the norms of your culture. So in my world, which is professional services, we realize that we can't just go out and say, today's problem is effective writing. Today's problem, Thursday's problem is executive leadership. We had to sit back and say, how do I define the nature of what it means for a professional, broadly defined, to operate under the brand of my firm? So preeminent brand, 3rd largest privately held company in the world, PwC, right? How do you build a workforce that's 200,000 strong around the world, 50,000 in the U.S., and say, I got to get them aligned to work together? So we crafted a model. Model defined what it means to be technically competent. Defined what it means to bring to the table the nature of your conversational ability around business acumen that says, I'm relevant to someone beyond the little nugget of technical information that I might know. How do I forge a relationship? And do it in a way that is so, in effect, characterized in a very simple way, because I found the more you can simplify what you're trying to do, the more greater ability you have to be able to go. But a relationship is, how do you have something interesting to say to somebody who wants to hear it such that they want to do business with you, right? And then finally, your global acumen, because the world, right, and the context around that is there. The last dimension is leadership, right? But this focus on leadership isn't executive 3%. It's broadly leadership. How do you advance leadership within your organization so that people can learn more in a technology-enabled world? How do you lead yourself? Once you can lead yourself, how do you lead others? How do you inspire? And then how do you advance the brand? Within that, when we found that we did that, we can now be out in the marketplace screening for the talent that best fits that model. We then also were able to align investments such that against that model we can now advance a real investment around these skill sets to produce in effect, the professional that stands against that brand. So the elements around this is that I think CEOs are becoming more aware of this, is that I can create a vision, I can create a strategy. I need a greater ability to have the talent pools around me that have the ability to execute that strategy so I can arrive at the solution. Because otherwise the strategy is worthless, right? So you're seeing a lot of that today and a lot of that thinking. And I think as a dynamic as a CLO, I'd be knocking on the door of the CEO's office and saying, why aren't you thinking about what I do in a way that delivers what you need? Because I'm the person who's going to lead the way to get you the workforce you need, right? And so I think you're going to see all of those changes occur. Programmatically, the tools that are out there, what you decide you own versus what you partner with, and the tools that are becoming available with digitalization are becoming more and more interesting so that you can actually make things more immersive, more snackable, right? Right. So, you know, the fact that digital is going beyond the old point-and-click tutorials to the videos to the self-studies to now integrated simulation. Right. You're seeing all of those trends go very, very quickly. So the way you invest and the way you choose are going to be influenced by how you first characterize that problem.
Yeah, and there's a big thing, by the way, you don't want to downplay in a let's say mixed environment where you have lots of different age groups and lots of different cultures coming together, the difficulty in getting people to adopt technology. It's probably the single, even though it is the path to the future, it's probably the single biggest challenge CLOs face is actually getting the user base to use it. And we should somehow in this segment talk about that a little bit, I think.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
Danielle, what's your perspective coming from an academic background as to why the skills gap exists in the corporate sector?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with both what Jeanne and Tom said. I think there's a lot of meat in there. I'm going to dig in a little bit, building off of what Tom said around the sort of people trends that we're seeing and then the tech trends, but I'm going to look at them from a slightly different angle. So just in terms of the skills gap that we have a changing global population. So for example, and we can see this all over the world, there's mass migrations of people, there's refugee crises going on right now. We have people sort of geographically moving from where they've been. We have political systems changing. I think Brexit is a great example of that. So the world around us is changing a lot, but even here in the United States, where the three of us are based, there's radical demographic shifting. So we talked about age in the workplace and the generational cohorts. That's incredibly relevant. But also we're seeing right now, about 75% of the U.S. population is white, about 12% African American, and the remaining sort of across various races. And by 2050 or 2055, the U.S. Census predicts that actually we will have no single majority in the United States, and that's going to be a huge difference even from where we are now. So if you work on a team right now that isn't diverse in terms of like age or race or background or socioeconomics or something, get ready, because there's almost no chance that your team will still look like that over the next 20, 30, 40 years. So on the one hand, we have these radical sort of people changes, and I think many of them are good as well. And then on the other hand, we have, I think Jeanne hit on this well, technology, where we are in Silicon Valley, changes literally every day. Like, I hear about like an app all the time, like I don't even have that one, or I don't know that. I mean, it's so instantaneous, sometimes multiple times in a day. Big trends that I think we're talking about a lot are, one, the Internet of Things, IoT, that's huge, really taking off. It's sort of like Web 3.0 in a way, and there's a big question about, what's going on with people's data, how are people storing that? These are good questions that affect sort of the work people are doing and then the skills that they need to do it well. Another great big topic is artificial intelligence, right? And I think when we imagine that, sometimes we think about these movies maybe we saw, when we were kids, where there's some crazy robots coming. But in some ways, I think actually artificial intelligence can be great, but it's already here. I mean, think about travel agents. I remember growing up, my parents, we'd want to go on vacation, and we had a travel agent. That job, in many cases, doesn't exist now. I can just ask my phone, hey Siri, what's the cheapest flight to JFK from SFO? So we see radical changes just in terms of the technology, and I think getting to your point, Vishali, about why we have a skills gap, those things are changing every moment, and I think often when we're trying to think about how do we skill people, we're looking at a snapshot in time and we're not forward thinking enough, which is hard, right? It's very easy to say we should all envision what the future will be and skill people up on those things, but there's inherent risk in that because there's just a lot of unknowns, and I think we're going to get at that more, so I'll sort of wrap up now, but I think the big things are technology and demographics.
Yeah, I was just going to say one other thing is that there's a reason why across the United States, and certainly starting to happen in other parts of developed countries, why there's a growing percentage of the population that is contingent in your workforce. There's a reason for that. It was all the things that you just talked about, which is, corporations, and when you're planning, I plan an organization, a very, very large organization, and when you're planning out your needs and your skills, sometimes you might need a skill for 6 months, and that need goes away, right? Other times you can't really accurately predict enough. So what's happening is corporations are using this contingent labor thing. That's why we're at 45% contingent labor right now. And more so in tech, right? Because things are moving so fast and shaping up so fast, we don't know what we should be bringing in full time. So we kind of test the waters with
Yeah,
continuing.
create flexible systems
Yes.
that allow us to be able to change in the moment.
And then bring on the ones that we know, we get a firmer conviction that we need them for the long term, because we want to be honest, right, with our workers about what the relationship we're going to have with them. And so this is another big, huge rising trend that will continue, and I predict that we'll be at 50% contingent labor in a very short period of time.
Yeah, the nature of work itself, I think you're hitting on, is changing. And
Yes.
I don't want to say too much about it because I know we're going to get to that, but yeah, I absolutely agree with everything you say. It's a really good point.
Yeah.